Welcome back to the Scattered Sheep Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Wade. It is March 26th. This is the trifecta of Troy Black week. This will be the third Troy Black video this week because when I went away for the weekend, he put out all of his claims of victory on recent false prophecies. I put up one a couple days ago, which was absurd. But yesterday was just a masterpiece in somebody who was clearly not hearing from God, and he made it abundantly clear. It is, in my opinion, the second most fun I've had doing a podcast. It ranks close to when Katie Souza taught us the all-important doctrine of how to cast witches off of their broomsticks. Because in the video from, actually today I should say, I just posted it. Excuse me, I think I'm getting sick. So I want to get this video done while I still had a voice. So the video I posted today, and forgive me for laughing so much throughout it, but Troy was so positively giddy about his belief that he had finally landed a real, nailed down a real prophecy that he can point to. He apparently thought that he really had a solid, what he actually referred to as the most accurate fulfillment of prophecy in his lifetime. It's always interesting when that's your prophecy, number one, but number two, it wasn't even close. And the hysterical thing that I'm not going to spoil it for you, but he claimed God gave him a key word. And that key word he felt was fulfilled, except he missed it by like 10 city blocks. And that's a literal phrase. So there's a little foreshadowing for you. So I would go watch that one, especially if you want to get a good laugh. So this is the longer one that took me a little while because I had to actually research the 6 prophecies that they're claiming victory on. I think there's 5 or 6. Thankfully, one of them is the Solana video prophecy, which I've already dealt with, so I don't have to do any work on that. I'll just repeat what I already know. As always, when you're dealing with this many, there's going to be some things that sound kind of like okay, but when you really step back and look at the macro picture, this is still a guy who's claiming God is speaking to him in sentence fragments. And what he does is he throws out 10, 15, 20 different things against the wall with cryptic language that can be interpreted 20 different ways about topics that he knows are going to be in the news. In most cases, right? And then his brother Reese scours the internet for however long a time that he's given for the prophecy, and he's trying to match some of the 20 things up, right? And maybe he gets one, maybe he gets 2, but the other 18 he misses completely. So, which begs the question, why God, the creator of the entire universe, would give his prophet a word with 20 different aspects to it and only fulfill 2 of them? And the answer to that is he wouldn't. So, a couple other things. Like I said, you ever get that feeling like in your throat that you're coming down with something? So, I'm hoping it's allergies. I took an Allegra, we'll see. But the other thing I want to mention is, I put out the Hank Kuhneman video a couple of days ago, which was, I believe, an hour long, and 95% of it dealt with the fleecing, the most disgusting type of fleecing you can imagine, right? Where he's trying to basically he's making his flock give a second offering for a travel fund so he can take private jets wherever he has to go, because he had to wait 10 hours over the weekend when he was going to Idaho for his silly Flashpoint conference that he does every week, where he sits on a panel with Lance Wallnau and other NAR Dominionists and waxes prophetically about how Donald Trump is the second coming of Elijah. So at any rate, the other 5%, was when I was discussing what I just said, right? I think I said something similar to that, which is, waxing prophetically about Donald Trump being the second coming of King Cyrus or something like that. And I pointed out the obvious fact, which is that he didn't address the reason why he had to wait 10 hours at the airport. And the reason why he had to wait 10 hours is because the idol that he makes everybody idolize, Donald Trump, the Republican Party, that's what NAR Dominionists do. They're the ones who are in control of the entire government, all three branches. And they don't want to get a deal done to pay the TSA agents. Now listen, I understand that if you live in a right-wing bubble and you get all your news from Fox or Newsmax, that sounds foreign to you because you've been told the Democrats are to blame. They can't be. They're in the minority. They control 0 branches of government. They have one weapon, and that's the filibuster. And that's meant to force the majority to compromise. That's how our system of government is designed. And all they're asking for is for limitations on ICE. Because they didn't think that 2 American citizens should have been shot to death in the streets of America. And you know what? I'm not embarrassed to say that I'm with that as an American and as a Christian. Having nothing to do with the Democratic Party. It's not. I don't play these bifurcated games where you have to go into one political box or another. I'm not on either team. I'm on Team Jesus. I'm pretty sure Jesus would not come down here and go, well, she shouldn't have been at a protest. Alex Pretty shouldn't have kicked the car the week before. It's good that they got shot. I don't know what gospel people read. I really don't. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is some folks somehow managed to watch an hour-long video where 95% of it had to do with fleecing the flock and only wanted to comment on the one comment I made about that. And that, my friends, is the NAR rot that's in the church today. If you can listen to an hour-long broadcast dealing with an absolutely evil false teacher who has fleeced millions of dollars from his flock, and I brought the receipts and I showed you how he's done it for the last 4 years. But I make one comment which is factual, and that's the thing that you feel that you need to discuss. I'm sorry, but listen, and I mean this with all sincerity and love. You need to realize that that's not Christianity. And that's the point that I've been making. This is not a political discussion. This is a Christian discussion. And I thought it was a pretty fair point that Hank Kuhneman decided that he needed private jets to fly everywhere because he was put off by having to wait 10 hours, but he can't put together the reason why he had to wait 10 hours is because of the people he supports politically and demands the church supports politically. And I'm sorry, these are not matters that are up for debate. If you understand government, I used to teach U.S. history and government. I taught it for 8 years. If you understand how the government works, the party in control is the party that has the ability to pass laws. They have the ability to subpoena people in investigations. The minority party has literally no power other than the filibuster. And by the way, I know nobody wants to hear this, but the Democrats wanted to fund all of the rest of the Department of Homeland Security and take out ICE and CBP. And they said they'll deal with that in the reconciliation process, which is coming up. And the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, agreed. And then he took it to the White House and Trump said no. So if you look at that fact pattern, and those are all undeniable facts, and you still conclude that somehow it's the Democrats' fault that TSA is not getting paid now, I can't help you. I'm sorry, I just can't. And I desperately don't want, and that's why I've talked to people I've talked to Observation Station and other friends of mine in discernment, and I've expressed my reticence at commenting at all on political matters. But it's kind of hard when the chief idolatry in the church today, what I refer to as the last idol of the church age, which is the title of my new book dealing with Christian nationalism, is NAR Dominionism. How do you avoid, the core facet of NAR Dominionism, which is Christian nationalism, It's kind of difficult to avoid things that are happening politically. But it was just a little disheartening that, if again, if you watch an hour, it's not like 95% of the video was about, politics, and 5% was about fleecing. It was the reverse. But anyway, I digress. So, and please, if you're one of those couple of folks who responded, I, I'm not saying this against you personally. I'm just saying that this is unfortunately what NAR dominionism teaches within the church, and it has to stop because it's nothing but pure idolatry. That being said, so Troy and Reese are out with their latest conglomeration claiming victory video. 5 or 6 videos they claim are fulfilled prophecies. We're going to go through each one of them, and we're going to explain why, once again, that's ridiculous. The title, 6 Prophecies Come to Pass, Prophetic Word Review. Take it away, Black Brothers.
So this was, I have the thumbnail pulled up here, but this was a video release titled God Told Me They're Hiding Near the White House, Prophetic Word. And you published this on January 11th, 2026.
So what I heard in this word, obviously originally heard it on the 2nd, shared it on the 11th, and I think it took place pretty shortly after that. But these are the phrases that I heard and that I shared, and when I share these, for those that are new to this channel, if this is the first video you've ever watched, I share these under the guidelines of 1 Corinthians 14, 1 Thessalonians 5, and I encourage the audience to weigh these words, test them.
And that's what we're doing, Troy. Don't you worry.
Compare, if there's any teaching or encouragement, compare that to scripture, but also compare the words of knowledge to what actually takes place. And that's what we're trying to do today, to bring some account.
No, you're not. What you're trying to do is you're trying to match things up to vagaries and claiming victory. That's all you're doing.
Accountability. But then also you can pray about it and you say, Holy Spirit, is this from you? Is this not from you?
And this is the stupidity of the grift that he has. And his dupes and his marks, they follow it. If you're the prophet of God, Troy, and you heard from God, there's just gibberish, which may as well be written in tongues. Why do we need to go pray about it? Is God going to tell some people, yeah, that I gave Troy that word, and other people he's going to go, I don't know, I never gave him that word? Because that would kind of make God schizophrenic.
And the Holy Spirit can help you to test prophecy as well. But this is what I shared that I had heard. Hidden in a shelter near the White House, it's a national security breach, an issue with national level security. Then I heard the phrase, they are here, they are there right now. And I heard, I will sort it out, says the Lord. You do not need to worry about it. And then I heard an unnerving and awkward meeting, a concatenation of events leading up to a sudden surprise visit, a leading away and into a place of hiding. Then I heard, yes, this is the presidential level of staff, yet not necessarily a direct threat to the president himself. So that phrase, says the Lord, is in there. I try to stay away from that when sharing prophecy if possible. I try not to add that to anything. I only shared that because that was a phrase I actually heard while I was hearing the word itself. But I try not to say that because I try to share prophecy through that level of like, I'm just a human being and the Holy Spirit is perfect. I'm not perfect and I'm doing my best and, letting God take care of the rest. And so I'm trying to share it, through that lens.
What drew my attention was this word concatenation. I had to look up what that was, and I already forgot it. I was like, it's
like a series of related events.
That's a $20 word right there.
Yeah, sometimes I hear words and I have to look them up after the fact because I don't know. Yeah, my vocabulary has been getting better and better. The more I've been.
It's too bad your prophecies haven't
involved in prophecy.
Incredible. Okay, let me pull this up. So this actually happened 2 days after you shared this word, so almost immediate fulfillment. See, January 13th, you shared this on January 11th. So on January 13th, this year, we have breaking: U.S. Secret Service agent assigned to Vice President J.D. Vance leaks sensitive security information to undercover reporter. This is James O'Keefe's network. It wasn't James O'Keefe, but it was one of his undercover reporters. It was secretly recording a Secret Service member. It looks like, if you watch the video, it kind of looks like they're on a date. It's a girl that's the reporter, and the service member is a guy, and she's secretly recording him and like asking him kind of like get to know you questions.
just the social commentary of how, to try to like basically entrap people who may, be desperately trying to find somebody who thinks that they're going out on a date. He shouldn't have done what he did. There's no question about that. But I have no love lost for the tactics that were used in this story.
And in this, secret interview, and the guy doesn't know that he's being filmed, he openly reveals the vice president's real-time location, just to her, just completely openly.
I love it. I love how Troy pretends like they haven't like previewed what they're going to talk about. Oh, is that what happened? Oh,
shows her pictures on his phone that have the metadata that show like where he took the photos and to show like past times of where the vice president was, as well as where he currently was at that moment, and also future travel plans, just openly shared with her future places that the vice president was going to go, as well as shift schedules for the Secret Service members and protective formations that are used to protect the vice president and his family. He exposed all that to her. The agent, this is, just part of one of the things. He also revealed himself to be a Biden voter and expressed some opposition to Trump's immigration policy,
which has absolutely no relevance to this story.
So there was that. And what was interesting about this, before they published it, they passed this along to the Secret Service before they published it publicly. And then the Secret Service told them, to censor a few things. So they redacted a few things that was, not safe to release to the public, like, future travel plans for the vice president. Sure. And so then the agent was placed on leave and his security clearance was suspended. And the Secret Service also released an internal memo reminding agents basically of the professionalism that their job demands of them. So we jump back to the prophecy
let's jump back to the prophecy
really fast. You have hidden near the White House. So the Secret Service are literally, in a shelter, so to speak.
No, they're not. I'll be honest, when he said this like so definitively, I have to like Google it. I'm like, is that right? No, of course it's not right. They're not hidden in a shelter near the White House. They have an office in the White House, the Secret Service does, because they work there. But the prophecy, the word directly from God Almighty, Troy, tell my people, hidden in a shelter near the White House. Why would he say that if they weren't hidden and they weren't in a shelter?
They're always present at the White House, right? They have a presence at the White House. So you have that. A shelter near the White House is, they have their...
And by the way, the next line, because keep it together, right? This is all the first line from the prophecy. Hidden in a shelter near the White House, it's a national security breach. So unless the date happened in a shelter that is hidden in the White House, the next line doesn't make any sense either. They were on a date in a restaurant. There was no national security breach hidden in a shelter at the White House.
Rooms or areas that they're supposed to be, at the White House. National security breach. That is obviously self-evident for the fulfillment. Here you have, they are there right now. When you shared it, it was at the same time that
But they weren't there right now. They were at a restaurant.
James O'Keefe Network and the Secret Service was working on like allowing this to be shared out to the public and also disciplining this Secret Service guy, right? Wow. And then you have this phrase here, an unnerving and awkward...
he skipped over, I will sort it out, says the Lord. You don't need to worry about it. 2 points. One, I don't think anybody was worrying about the fact that some poor Secret Service agent, like trying to find a date, made the ridiculous mistake of giving out classified information. I don't think anybody was worrying about it, number one. And number two, the Lord's going to sort it out? Come on.
And I just thought this was kind of funny. Like, I could see it both ways. This could either describe the awkward, that like fake date, very awkward, right? The unnerving, awkward meeting. There was like a fake date where she was filming the Secret Service member. That it could describe that meeting, but it could also describe the meeting that the Secret Service member had with his superiors right after this got released, like them coming into his office.
It could mean anything, though. It could be any meeting. This is the game they play. But remember, this is, even though they have a double-spaced line, but this is the same prophecy. So the unnerving and awkward meeting is clearly related to what's hidden in the shelter at the White House being a national security breach. but it's not.
And being like, hey, you're getting put on leave and we're removing your
You
security.
got caught. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would have been pretty awkward.
I bet that date didn't end up so well either.
Date probably didn't go very well after that either. You also had this phrase here. You said a leading away, a place of hiding. I'm not 100% sure what that is. My thought was it could describe the fact that the agent got suspended and put on leave.
What? A leading away into a place of hiding because the agent got suspended? That doesn't make any sense, Reese. But again, this is the game they play. The parts of the prophecy that they think that they can't come up with a credible reason for, they have to do a reach.
So I don't know if that was kind of like
I wonder if they
pushing him
also
away,
like
putting him in hiding, but it could be a different interpretation. Say what?
yeah. When I look at that, I wonder if it has to do with like changing the vice president's like plans as to where he's going to be based on the information that went out. I don't know. Like could be, could not be.
Yeah, it's not, because you know why? Because they didn't have to take J.D. Vance leading him away into a place of hiding, which is what you said God said. That never happened.
It could be related to that, to the protecting of the vice president. In
No.
that way. This final one you have here this is a perfect description of the fact that this was a threat to the vice president and not to President Trump himself. So this is the presidential level of staff, the Secret Service staff, and then you say yet not necessarily a direct to the president himself. So not a threat to President Trump because it wasn't on his detail, but it was on the vice president's detail. So it's at that level, but not. And so it's just
right. So by adding that in the original prophecy, obviously he gave himself a lot of outs. If he pigeonholed himself just to Trump, then it would have to be directly related to Trump. But by saying it was the presidential level of staff, it could be anybody in the White House.
I was blown away by that. I was like, that was a perfect description of what came out just 2 days later.
Yeah, the Lord is, I don't know. I'm still amazed at sometimes at the, at just the gift of prophecy itself. I know it's the word says it's the will of the Holy Spirit. It's not the will of man, but also like God's willingness to interact with us and things like this. I think people think that someone like me, I'm over it by now, and I'm not, like, I'm just, the Lord is so good,
He's such a grifter. I just can't. He knows full well, guys. He knows full well that they're lying, that they're making this story up.
And every time somebody gets healed, I'm like, wow, God is so good.
Healed? Who gets healed in your ministry, Troy?
Every time somebody gets delivered or set free from something, I'm like, wow, God is so good. Every time I see somebody get saved, or I'm reminded of my own need for God's grace and how much he's shown grace and love and mercy. I'm just like, I'm amazed at it. So
Love it.
God is so good.
I love it. This is one that was released on November 9th, 2025. And this is called God Just Gave Me a Warning About George W. Bush. And this word's awesome. This is like a pretty funny word, honestly.
Yeah. So what I heard the phrase George W. Bush is going to be on call. And then I said, and obviously on call is that picture of somebody waiting to get a call so that they can step into a project or go complete a job or a task. And then I shared in the limelight again for a specific reason, coming back for more. A certain organization is going to call him and say, come on, let's get this thing done together. He will say, count me in. I'm at loose ends right now. I
was just checking, like, why did they have this music now playing in the background?
Nothing better to do. And then I heard the phrase, a George Bush calling card, his namesake presented before a committee. He will be toast shortly after this. And then I shared the word roasted, and I said I believe that's a response to this decision he's making. Essentially, he's going to get toasted or roasted, as people do. Mm-hmm. And then I shared the phrase between a rock and a hard place and not sure what to do. This is his own doing.
Okay, this one was pretty credible with the how quickly it happened after you shared it. This report was released 9 days later on November 18th.
So let's start with the fact of what the Daily Mail is. Is the Daily Mail reliable? No, it's generally considered unreliable. For news, fact-checking, and scientific accuracy, often described as sensationalist and prone to fabricating stories. This is part of Troy's problem, too, is that because he lives in a right-wing political bubble, all of his news comes from these sources. But the majority of the time that he uses these sources, they're either inaccurate or distorted. So then why what is God subscribed to the Daily Mail? Like, God knows the truth about everything. We're gonna see that in this story.
2025. It's called The Secret Life of George W. Bush. He's vanished into the shadows for 16 years. Now we know what he's been plotting all along. So I'll get a little bit of what he's been plotting. But the fact that this...
Just be prepared. He hasn't been plotting anything. This is a fabricated story by a huckster news source.
Came out in the news was incredible. I remember when we talked about getting ready for this video, you mentioned how you had a friend that thought George W. Bush was dead. Like, we hadn't heard any news about George W. Bush in so long. You had like somebody at the gym or something that was like, didn't he pass away? And you're like, no, he's still alive.
A friend of mine.
Yeah. He just hasn't been in the news. So he hadn't been in the news for years. See, there's no news at all. You give this prophetic word. 9 days later, all of a sudden, this major report lands. Here's an article on that report. Bush family.
Breitbart. One of the most disreputable fake news sources alive today. That's who they're, and the report. Bush family plotting comeback to retake the GOP from Trump. Never happened. Not true. Was a rumor floated by right-wing sources to allow people like Donald Trump Jr. to opine about how MAGA was never going to relinquish power. But to these guys, this is a fulfillment of prophecy.
Plotting comeback to retake GOP from Trump. It alludes to that there was a plot to end Bush's 16-year exile, it calls it, from the...
Except there wasn't. It took me less than 5 minutes to debunk this.
GOP to reclaim the party from, this is quoting from the report, the so-called scourge of Trumpism. And it includes a former RNC chairman who reportedly had been encouraging George Bush to get more involved with the party again.
Yeah. Now the way he's presenting this, or the way he's getting from Breitbart, is a former GOP, head of the GOP, is encouraging him, and that's not true either. The person they're talking about is Michael Steele. Michael Steele works for MS Now, which used to be MSNBC. There was one show where he was pontificating about Obama and how he was trying to bring clarity to this political moment about, dealing with Trump, right? And he basically said, this is the quote, "President Bush, please, man, we could use your voice right now. We really, really could." That's it. So he's making it sound like a conspiracy, like a former RNC chairman is like secretly like behind the scenes like egging Bush on. That's not true. He made one sentence in a political talk show.
And egg on George Bush and be like, hey, come back. Trump's term, is going to come to a close in the next few years.
None of that. He didn't say any of that. He was speaking in general about speaking right now, not when Trump leaves office, right now, to speak to what he felt was going on in the country.
You can help the upper GOP leadership and retake the party from him, basically.
Basically, but it's not true. It's completely fabricated. And you want us to believe God told you this.
The reactions to this were pretty dramatic. Here's one from Donald Trump Jr. on X.
Gee, now what? I wonder what Donald Trump Jr. would say to a rumor that George Bush is going to take control of the GOP back from MAGA.
He says, "We will never let this happen." That's his response to this. Many conservatives responded in a similar manner, essentially roasting George Bush for his wars in the Middle East and just the fact that he's a neocon and that he's part of the old guard of the GOP and that they don't like the old guard anymore and the party has moved on. This is
just to be clear, the party itself has not moved on. MAGA has carved out a chunk of the Republican Party. There's still a lot of people in the Republican Party who think MAGA is too far on the extreme side from a political standpoint. The overall point here, though, is that you're lying that God told you this. Because the story that you're using to back up the fulfillment of the prophecy is fake.
new Republicans speaking. It's no longer the party of the old guard and the neocons and all that. It's different now. He got roasted online about this. The very last thing that also happened that could be related to this that was interesting, 2 days after this report came out that I mentioned, this was on November 20th, George W. Bush was called on to give a eulogy at Dick Cheney's funeral. So he was literally called on, like, hey, George Bush, come do this thing. And he goes and gives a eulogy for Dick Cheney. So jumping back to the prophecy here, I thought this was interesting. Of course, he's going to get a call. A certain organization is going to call him. That's literally right there is the former RNC chairman calling him and encouraging him to get involved.
Except he never called him. You're making that part up, or the news sources that you're using are making that up. The prophecy reads George W. Bush is going to be on call. He was never on call. Troy says, obviously on call is a picture of somebody waiting to get a call. George Bush was never waiting to get a call. He never got a call. There was no call. There was one sentence spoken on a political talk show. And the finishing of that sentence is so they can step into a project or go complete a job or a task. That never was fulfilled either.
The party again, right? He says, count me in. According to the report, Bush agreed to get more.
Yeah, but that's not true. George Bush responds to Michael Steele's call to be more involved. So the request, October 2025, Steele expressed the desire for Bush to pull us together, stating the country could use a voice of a former leader to bring clarity. Steele's perspective was that he noted that while he understands the partisan landscape, he believes a voice like Bush's could resonate with many Americans. Bush's response. While the search result highlights Steele's public plea to Bush in late 2025, there is no direct public response from George W. Bush regarding this specific call to action in the provided data. Oops. So I'm sorry, Reese, you were lying?
Involved again. He agreed to this.
He did not agree to it.
Sounds like a good idea, and he is, planning on coming back and retake.
Right. The word in front of us is God told Troy Black to tell the church that George Bush said, count me in. I'm at loose ends right now. I've got nothing better to do. None of that ever happened. Bush has still not commented on it. And either way, it was not to take the party back. Michael Steele's plea was for him to be more vocal in his opposition. Now, not in 2028.
I don't know if he is anymore, but when this report came out, he was planning on coming back and retaking the reins of the party after Trump was done.
No, he was not.
Here in the last two, you say a George Bush calling card presented before a committee, and it says he will be toast shortly after this. He will be roasted. Well, a calling card is what somebody's known for. So what this report did was it got his legacy back up, in people's minds again. And then everybody kind of like roasted him and made people basically make value judgments on his tenure. Like, was he?
Yeah. Do you see the part that he conveniently doesn't mention? The George Bush calling card, his namesake, meaning the Bush name, will be presented before a committee. Where's the committee, Reese?
The president, was he not?
And by the way, he wasn't toast. Just because MAGA came out and said no, that doesn't mean he was roasted. There were plenty of people who probably agreed with Michael Steele's call in the Republican Party.
Like him to come back and take over the party or not. And of course, a lot of people.
And note the next line from the prophecy. Roasted, in parentheses, Troy says, I believe that's a response to the decision that he's making, except he never made this decision. Another part not fulfilled.
To them and said no. And then, of course, that ends with this, put him between a rock and a hard place, not sure what to do. This is his own doing. That could possibly be referring to the fact that maybe he's now doesn't know what to do because the plans to...
Or maybe that whole thing never came to pass because you're lying, Reese. He wasn't put between a rock and a hard place, and he wasn't sure what to do. And then Troy said, God said, this is of his own doing. How in the world is this George W. Bush's own doing? He said nothing, he asked for nothing, and he responded to nothing. Fake prophecy.
Retake the party kind of got leaked. and the response to it was overwhelmingly negative. So maybe he's in a rock and a hard place now, because it's like, well, there's not the public support apparently for him to regain.
And that's not true either. Just because Donald Trump Jr. said no way.
The party. That's my interpretation of that last line. I can't prove that, obviously, but it felt like it
Then why are you saying it as a fulfilled prophecy?
connected there.
I think that's a really good review, man. Yeah, that's crazy. Oh man, just some of the memes that came out of George Bush trying to come back and take over the Republican Party were pretty great.
I don't think I saw any of those, and I love a good meme, so I should look those up later. All right, this is a really quick one. I think that you had something you wanted to share about this as well. This is a crypto word that you gave recently. This one was, actually you gave 5 different crypto words in this one, but
What's with the soft jazz playing in the background?
one of them has seemingly already come to pass. So this was called God Told Me What's Coming for Crypto, 5 Prophetic Words, and you published this on October 1st, 2025.
So yeah, it doesn't seem like the other ones have come to pass yet in that video, but I think this one definitely has. So this was something I heard June 14th. I did not share it until October 1st of 2025. But what I shared was Solana, and that's a crypto coin for those that don't know. Solana is the next major player. It's going to activate one last time. And then I heard, wait for it to drop below 100, then get in. So I need to share a few disclaimers with this.
And the reason why he's going to disclaim is because Troy got himself in a lot of trouble with this and some of his other BS crypto advice. Is apparently a lot of his followers actually listened to him and thought that, well, I'm getting inside information from God Almighty. And they invested their money and they lost their shirts. And then they went back to Troy and they're like, hey, dude, what happened to this prophecy? Now all of a sudden he's like, oh, I didn't say to do that. Kind of like Brandon Biggs, disclaimer, like I'm only providing entertainment.
This is not financial advice. It was not originally financial advice. I encourage
It's a real simple prophecy. There's 2 lines. Solana is a major player. It's going to activate one last time, which, by the way, doesn't make any sense because it didn't activate. It lost money. Wait for it to drop below 100 and get in. How can you read that last line and not conclude that this was not financial advice? Wait for it to drop below 100 and then get in. If it was just information to prove God Almighty with a word of knowledge, he would have said, Solana's going to go under 100. And he wouldn't have given the then get in part, which is financial advice. And I sincerely hope anybody who lost money sues Troy Black.
you not to simply take this and say, well, I'm going to go invest in something like Solana. I encourage you to only invest in ways that you don't feel are gambling.
Yeah, whatever, dude. Listen, what do you expect when you tell people that believe you hear directly from God Almighty that God Almighty is giving them a stock tip? And he's saying, oh, when it gets below 100, you need to get in. What do you think that they're going to think? I know what I would think, and I know you're a false prophet. But if I thought you were real and you were really hearing from God, yeah, I'd probably empty my bank account on Solana when it got under 100. So you may be wondering what happened. So here's the deal before he continues to embarrass himself. Solana, at the time that he made this prophecy, I believe was trading over $200. And it dropped below 100. It did. And I'm sure that the people that follow Troy Black, when it hit under 100, bought. And then it dropped to 90. And then it dropped to 80. And then it dropped to 78. So they lost 22 points of position. Just let me check what Solana's trading at today. $86. So that's up from 78. It's up it's up $8. But if you got in at 100 or a little under 100, you're currently sitting on negative 14 points of position. You're not making money, you're losing money. So it begs the question, if God is omniscient and knows everything, then he knew that it was going to fall to 78. Why then would he advise his followers, his sheep, to get in when it goes below 100? And the answer is he wouldn't. This is absurd. It was an absurd prophecy when he gave it, and it's not fulfilled. Remember, this is a claim of victory. Why? Because it got under 100. The problem that he's got is the then get in part, which is not fulfilled. If anything, people lost money because of it.
Ways that are wise, and then also to do your research for yourself if you're going to invest something, and to realize that something like cryptocurrency is extremely volatile. People lose a lot of money with crypto.
Really? Do you have any other factoids for us, Captain Obvious? And if it's so volatile, why are you advising your followers to get in when it goes below 100?
I'm not saying you shouldn't ever do it. I'm just saying you've got to realize that is in some ways like gambling. Even
all stock market activity is gambling. It's just legalized gambling. That's all it is. You're betting that what you're buying is going to go up. And if it goes up, you make money. If it goes down, you lose money. So when you say get in at 100 and it drops to 78, you lost 22 points of position for your followers.
more so
On behalf of God.
than the stock market is.
It's very risky, sure.
It's very, very risky, right? And so I hope and pray people don't just take this and go, well, then I'm going to go do this thing. But I would even encourage you, if you're going to invest or something, I mean, pray and ask the Lord yourself too.
Right. So he's trying to cover himself now, so that if people sue him, he can go, oh, look at this video where I say you have to go to the Lord and pray about it. Which goes back to the original point. If you're the prophet of God and he told you get in under 100, why do I need to go pray about it? Because you know what's going to happen because of the way confirmation bias works. People are going to go home and pray, and they're going to hear from the Lord God Almighty, no, Troy's a good prophet. You get in when I said under 100. But now what he thinks he's done is he's transferred responsibility to the individual person.
Research, and only invest as much as you're willing to lose. And then, if you are going to do that, but also this is not financial advice. I'm not personally telling people to do that, encouraging people to do that. Instead, this was the word I heard, and I believe the word itself has been fulfilled. I also do want to say
it has not.
The same goes for any crypto or stock market word that I've received. I don't enjoy sharing these words, and I believe the Holy Spirit has kind of shown me that I'm going to be getting less and less of these in the future.
Right. That's what happened after all the people pushed back that lost their shirts. Is all of a sudden he came out and said, "The Lord has told me that I'll be getting less and less of these words." I wonder why.
I think because people just tend to have a negative reaction sometimes to these kind of words.
So the first part of this, it's too early to know this one. Solana is going to be the next major player. What's the fulfillment of that going to look like? So it's too early to know, so we're waiting on that one. The second half in this is the description that it is going to drop below 100. So let's go ahead and take a look at the graphs and see what this was. And again, you shared this on October 1st.
What y'all are seeing is the graph of where Solana was back in October when I shared the word. What was it sitting at, Reese?
221 on the day that you shared. It was at 221. So you were predicting that it was going to drop and over.
It's just the hubris. You're showing the graph with the stock price at $84.99, 15 points below the 100 that you told everybody God said to get in at, and they don't care. They don't care. People cashed out their 401ks. They don't care. People took their life savings and lost it. They don't care. It's spiritually criminal, and it might be regularly criminal as well.
Half its value, $221, and it was going to have to drop all the way down to 100. So down on the right over here is where it was at when you shared it. And then to the left is the full history of Solana. So this is...
Yeah, and mind you, just from a stock perspective, and I'm no expert on stocks, please. If the word was, God says Solana is going to get under 100 and is currently trading at 221, then you would put an option bet that it would drop under 100. The problem is that he added in, that's when you get in. God said that's when you get in. So people are waiting instead for it to get to 100 and then they buy.
Worth noting, the last time that it was under $100 was on February 7th, 2024. So almost 2 years before you shared the prophecy was the last time that it was somewhere over here. Was the last time that it was actually under $100 for like, so about 2 years. It was well over $100.
So it had stayed above that for a long time.
Yeah.
And I remember when I shared that video, I got a lot of comments from people saying, there's no way Solana is ever going to drop below 100. Like a lot of people saying that's impossible. It'll never happen. It'll never drop below 100. And I started to sweat when I saw those comments. I was like, well, y'all know a lot more about this than I do. So
yeah. You lost all your money. Let me just make fun of it.
It's what I heard. So that's what I shared.
All right. So that's the history, and then that's where it was at. Again, $221 on the day that you shared it, the day you released it publicly. Here on the left where it's up in the green is when you shared it, again, well above $200. And then 4 months after you shared it is when it dropped below $100. So 4 months after this prophecy was shared on February 3rd, 2026, Solana dips under $100. You see that here, all the way down here in February. And it is still there at the moment, but it looks like it's climbing back up a little bit. It dipped well below $100.
I had some.
They're clueless. You lost all your people money.
People get upset after that because they invested after it dropped below 100 and it didn't go up as fast as they thought it was going to. And again, I would point that back to, that was never in the original word. The word did not say it's going to skyrocket as soon as it hits 100. But rather, to me, the impression of that word itself is when it goes below 100, that's a good season to get in if that's something you're into.
But that's not what you said. That's not what you said, Troy. You said God Almighty said it's going to get under 100, and that's the time to get in. That's what you said. Stop trying to dance around it. Oh, I didn't say it was going to skyrocket. It didn't skyrocket. It plummeted after they bought it. This is evil.
You feel like it's something the Lord is allowing you to invest in. So like that
wasn't your caveat. There was no caveat of like that in the original prophecy.
Or the impression that I got, and it's it's just one of those difficult things because I think people's expectation when it comes to financial stuff can be one way, but it's not necessarily exactly what was shared. So
sure.
No, it was what was shared. It was very clear. You just had it up on the screen. Under 100, get in.
Right. I mean, you didn't say it was going to get under 100 and then the next day it was going to skyrocket. It was still going down for a little bit, but it is going back up. The first part of the word was.
But why, Reese, would God say when it gets under 100, get in if he knew it was going to drop to 78? Wouldn't God rather have his people? Wouldn't that facilitate the great wealth transfer? Where the heck are my camels, by the way?
Accurate, and so I believe, and based off your track record, the second part of the word is probably going to be accurate as well. That's my thought, but we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Sure, but also I do want to say this. We prophesy in part, so it's like what I
don't know if you noticed, but as we're watching the video, Solana's stock price just went down again. It was $84.99. Now it's $84.93. God is good.
I shared is all I heard, so I don't know. It could go down again before it goes back up. What
does that mean? Tangibly, for the people that follow you, Troy, it means you're losing them money.
Next, if the second half of the word is accurate as well, it might drop even further before it goes back above 100. So
why would God not say that then? Why would God put the marker on $100 and say that then get in? They can't answer this. And by the way, their belaboring of this they should have spoke it and moved on. But they're belaboring it because they know full well that there's a lot of people out there that listen to this nonsense and lost money.
No, it's just I'm going off of only what I heard and not not the
right.
full picture.
So it's God's fault. Got it.
So
for sure. This is one that you shared on July 11th, 2025, and it's called God Told Me What's Coming in August, Prophetic Warning. Again, this was shared July 11th.
Yeah, so what I heard was August leading into October. So that would be like August, September, October timeline. That's what I said. And then I heard another rumbling of sorts, yet this time in the market, balance and trade. Then I heard this phrase, forging new paths this year. The government is making new roads, quote unquote, in the financial marketplace, forging new paths, taking new waters where ships have never gone. Some vessels will sink in the process, but it will not be for nothing.
Now, before we get into their bogus fulfillment, what does it sound like that this prophecy is talking about? Leave your comments in the comment section in case you think I'm crazy. He gives a 3-month timeline, a rumbling of sorts. The title is a financial rumbling. Yet this time in the market, not the marketplace, the market. What is the market? The market is the stock market. Balance and trade. Forging new passes here. The government is making new roads. The government is making new roads in the financial marketplace. Forging new paths. And then he gets into allegory, right? New ships and water and vessels sinking and stuff like that.
They will return with spoils eventually and make a country rich. Then I heard there is something happening here that is much bigger than the US or a single other country. The good of the world is at stake right now, and I'm settling into position some of the current strategies in order to, quote unquote, set you up for what's next. A country, a nation meant for more than it's currently doing for my kingdom. I'm calling her up and out of her current state and asking her to do more. She knows she's capable of doing so much more. They will squabble and shout, trying to figure out who to blame.
So a lot of description here, a lot of description. I'm going to run through this one really quick.
Which let me translate that. There's a lot of bovine excrement here. He just threw a bunch of poop against the wall and hoped that Reese can match a couple things up and so they can ignore the rest of it and claim victory.
So I'm going to again point people to the Prophecy Archive link that'll be in the description below. If you want to read all of the many details I have on there of everything that happens during the timeline, because there's so much. Right now, I'm just going to give like a summary sort of description of it and how it matches the timeline, because there's so much that happened inside of that timeline. And it just, you can run through it and it connects to everything that you list out here. So again, you shared this July 11th. So July 28th, the U.S. and China trade officials meet in Sweden to discuss how to ease tensions.
So let me start with the obvious, right? If this was the intention to give this ridiculously vague prophecy with sentence fragments, we knew about the tariffs months before this. We knew about the uncertainty months before this. In July of this year, if I remember correctly, the news every day was like, is Trump going to raise the tariffs? Is he going to lower the tariffs? If somebody makes him mad, he's going to like quadruple them. The markets were completely upset about it. So how exactly is a prophecy to then say there's going to be a financial rumbling? No kidding.
This is what was happening here. So 4 months before this meeting, Donald Trump put massive tariffs on China, huge tariffs on China. China immediately retaliated with higher tariffs. They already had tariffs on us, but they bumped them up in retaliation, higher tariffs on us. And then both parties agreed to a 3-month pause on the tariffs. Say, okay, let's bring them back down to where they were. We'll do a pause, and then when we'll, hopefully we'll figure something out before the pause runs out. Well, that pause was set to run out mid-August. That was set in place before you shared your word. But then you share this on July 11th, and then July 28th, they meet in Sweden.
Mind you, the first Trump tariff on China, February. This is July.
Try to figure out what they're going to do about the pause coming up. It's expiring in mid-August. It's coming up very quickly. Trying to figure out what are we going to do about it. Well, this is what they finally figure out they're going to do about it, and they don't do this until August. So come early August 11th, right before the pause was going to expire, they finally agree to extend the pause again. That's it. They're like, okay, we haven't figured out what to do yet. We're just going to extend the pause for another 3 months. So they extend the pause for another 3 months, and they make themselves agree to this. They say, during these 3 months, we're going to nail down a real new trade deal. So we have 3 months to do this. Well, this 3-month negotiation period that they extend and say, we're going to pause and we're going to negotiate for 3 months, perfectly matches your timeline. The 3-month negotiation period.
It's too bad it doesn't match anything else.
It is August, September, October. That's what you said, August, September, October. And then the pause expires early November, right? So they give themselves this 3 months to make the trade deal. And that's in your prophecy. You have the words, new roads in the financial marketplace. So this is a new trade deal, and they're trying to hammer out, which is a new road right in the financial market.
I'm sorry, that is unbelievably stupid. But this is what they do. These words are so vague. The government's making new roads, and he wants to pretend that that means it's a new trade deal. Like God doesn't understand the word trade deal. Like if God was going to give a prophecy to his prophet, he would say, the government's going to make a new trade deal in the financial market. No, he's going to say, new roads. You figure it out.
Place. You can go read all the details on the Prophecy Archive page I'm going to have. I'll just give a few right here, but everything that happens from August through October connects to your prophecy that's related to this trade deal. And there was so much that happened. There was drama over soybeans and rare earth minerals. Everybody called it a trade war. Everyone was.
Troy did a separate video on rare earth minerals where he said God told him that there's going to be an issue with a rare earth mineral, but don't worry, it's not gold or silver. The problem? Gold and silver aren't rare earth minerals. Yet another example that Troy Black clearly does not hear from God.
Like this, the negotiation period is like, it's a trade war. It was ratcheting it up on both sides. There was more threats of tariffs and things, and everything was set for November 1st. So it was like, we either get this trade deal figured out, or November 1st, this thing's blowing up. We're getting all the tariffs, new tariffs, and all this kind of stuff. Crypto markets crashed in October over this. In your prophecy, you specifically talk about ships, waters. Ships have never gone. You talk vessels sinking. You talk about ships specifically. The trade deal that ended up getting hammered out was shipbuilding was central to it. Our capacity for building ships and China's capacity to build ships. There was argument over that, and that was actually
okay. All right. Where's that in the prophecy? There's nothing in here about shipbuilding. Forging new paths, taking new waters where ships have never gone. Where's the place that ships have never gone in this prophecy fulfillment? Some vessels will sink. Which vessels sank, Reese? But it will not be for nothing. Whatever. It's so glaringly ridiculous.
Became central part of the trade deal here, but the timeline wrapped up really nicely. The new trade deal was finally created, as opposed to just extending it again. They didn't just extend it for another 3 months. They actually still here, but no, we're getting all.
Sorry, I just want to go back. So I have the first page of the prophecy. So August leading into October. So Reese was able to find something to fit into that window. I'll be honest, he didn't have to. As long as something happened in between those 3 months, he would claim victory. But he managed to find something that perfectly fit into 3 months. And because of that, they think they could avoid the rest of the entire prophecy. A rumbling of sorts. There's no rumbling. This has been the ongoing negotiation since February about tariffs. Yet this time in the market, balance and trade. But there wasn't. Forging new paths, did he get into the new roads? It's supposed to mean like new, what did he say, new trade deals? That because shipbuilding was in there, suddenly, whoa, you said the word ship? And look, shipbuilding was one of the issues, so therefore that prophecy is fulfilled. Completely ignores, they will return with spoils eventually and make a country rich. What country? What spoils? What are you talking about? Why did you not even mention it? There's something happening here that's much bigger than the U.S. or a single other country. Really? It's just a trade deal between China and the U.S. The good of the world. The good of the world is at stake right now, according to these two idiots, based upon the tariff deal between China and the United States. The good of the world is at stake. The prophecy says that I'm settling into position some of the current strategies in order to set you up for what's next. What does that mean? That's not in here.
Tariffs, new tariffs, and all this kind of stuff. Crypto markets crashed in October over this. In your prophecy, you specifically talk about ships, waters. Ships have never gone. You talk vessels sinking. You talk about ships specifically. The trade deal that ended up getting hammered out was shipbuilding was central to it. Our capacity for building ships and China's capacity to build ships. There was argument over that, and that was actually became central part of the trade deal here. But the timeline wrapped up really nicely. The new trade deal was finally created, as opposed to just extending it again. They didn't just extend it for another 3 months. They actually finished the trade deal and made a real trade deal with China and the United States. And that wrapped up on October 30th, 2025, at the very end of October. So the timeline was really incredible and interesting on this one. So.
Yeah, it's too bad none of the other stuff actually came to pass. Who cares if the timeline lines up?
Again, go read it because there's too many details for me to talk about for sake of time right now.
For those that are new to this channel as well, on that prophecy archive, you can find that at troyblackvideos.com. Reese has done an excellent job of researching over 100 prophetic words. I think we're at like 125 now, and showing what has happened since they were publicly shared. But then also we have them listed out by year. There's also a search bar where you can search for specific words and try to find the ones you're looking for if you've seen a certain video and you're looking for the response to that. But then also there's a highlight page as well, where you look at the top 10. They're kind of like the coolest or most outrageous I guess fulfillments. That's all available on troyblackvideos.com.
Let's get into these Christmas words. So this was one you published on October 19th, 2025, well before Christmas, called God Warned Me What's Coming by Christmas 2025. And I have the word pulled up right here.
Yeah, so both of these words we're about to go through, people have been waiting for months. So I apologize for the extreme delay in getting the results out. But we wanted to make sure that we had accurate results. We've actually done the research, and looked into what's actually taking place instead of just rushing to get them out.
And we were busy with planning that event. We had the
lot of things going in the beginning.
Tree Life event in January, and we had a lot of things going on. So sorry for the delay on these, but we're getting them out now.
So in this first one that I shared October 19th, I saw a vision of a reindeer, and I mentioned that I felt like the Lord was referencing the Christmas season because a lot of people use that as symbolism for Christmas. And I mentioned that it seemed like the reindeer also represented nature, and I sort of got an impression that was what that was. Then I saw a forest in a national park, and I got an impression that there was either a national park or somewhere important like that would be involved. And then I heard a landmark, a national wildlife situation, a national monument is changing and will look very different by this Christmas. Then I heard this has to do with both nature and the creation of man. And I talked about how nature being God's creation of man means something that people set up. And then I shared, even if the location is just marked by what man has made. And then I shared the phrase, by this Christmas, something is coming that will have the local media concerned. Like lightning, suddenly the national news will pick it up too. They will say we should have seen this one coming, but we didn't. They will attempt to put blame on someone who has no control over the situation or outcome.
The largest fulfillment that was most obvious, especially with, you have this title here, even if the location is just marked by what man has made, but there's so many connections, but that one just stuck out to me about the the physical marking of these natural locations. There's a little bit of setup here. President Trump had an executive order that this was actually done back in March. You can see it's called Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History.
Right, so don't lose sight of this. The prophecy was in October. The executive order was in March. Prophecy is not predicting what's already happened or basically prognosticating based upon something that happened in the past, which is all this fake prophecy is.
Down here under the section, you can see he's telling the Secretary of the Interior, and the Interior Department is over the Parks, National Park Services, NPS. It is to look into whether or not any changes made to the signage and the information at national parks and monuments that happened during the Biden era, whether any of those changes were politically motivated. In layman's terms, essentially whether or not there was any woke ideology that got inserted into American history. That's what this is trying to address. That's what it's talking about. So try to find those changes that were made, revert those changes, and then here on the bottom, it also says to take action for any content that, quote, content that inappropriately disparages Americans past or living, including persons living in colonial times, and instead focus on the greatness of achievements and progress of the American people, or with respect to the natural features, the beauty and abundance and grandeur of the American landscape. Summary saying, let's take out any of the things that are kind of painting American history in a bad light.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that, because they're both right-wing nuts. They're not stating the obvious here, which is history is history. Okay, so there's good history and there's bad history. And what this executive order basically says is don't point out anything bad. Slavery, don't mention that. Jim Crow, don't mention that. Instead, focus on the good things that happened. Which is, as a former teacher of American history, very disturbing.
Disparaging colonial timed people, and let's just focus on kind of the greatness of our history, the greatness of the American landscape. For right-wing people, they'd see this and be like, which I am a right-wing person, this is trying to remove woke stuff from the national parks and monuments.
Yeah, history is not woke. It can't be woke, which is a ridiculous word to begin with.
That's right. That's it at its core. These removals actually began happening in September. So let me pull this up.
September, just so we understand the calendar, September comes before October.
Here, so you released this word again. You released it October 19th.
October.
Some of this was already occurring when you released this word. This was the very first.
Then how is it prophetic? How is it prophetic, Reese? He just admitted it. This was already happening.
First of this, the national review of all of the signs and the literature at these parks was occurring during the summertime. And then in September, they first removed a few signs from literally one park, Acadia National Park. And so there was a little bit that occurred. And then you shared in October this word. So then the activity actually ramps up a lot more in December. So you shared that this was going to be around the Christmas time. So here in December, we have, this was a local Arkansas news outlet. They share the first December story that I could find that presents actual new information. Before, people were just talking about, they're like, oh, Trump made this executive order. They're looking at removing.
Yeah, that's not true either. So October 1st, erasing history, silencing science. Acting upon a March executive order, the Department of Interior removed national park sites in September, undeniable historical and scientific truths it decided it didn't like. As mandated by law, national parks tell the full story of America from our darkest chapters to our greatest triumphs and protects landscapes unimpaired for future generations. These latest efforts follow steps this spring to sanitize history when the National Park Service was told to remove references to slavery and LGBTQ and history from its web pages. News media outlets recently brought attention to removed Park Service signage, missing educational materials, and websites scrubbed of undeniable truths from slavery to transgender activism and unimpeachable scientific research on climate change. Pretending the bad stuff never happened is not going to make it go away, NPCA's Director of Cultural Resources said in an interview. We need to be able to talk about these things if we're going to bring any hope. And the example, I don't know if you remember this story. Remember, this is 19 days before the prophecy. Department of Interior had ordered a famous Civil War era photograph titled Scourged Back to be removed from at least one national park site, according to the Washington Post. The 1863 photograph depicts an enslaved man named Peter with prominent whip scars he suffered before escaping. At the time it was circulated, the image shocked the nation and the world with an honest depiction of the nature of U.S. slavery. And this was removed before the prophecy. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to pretend, there was like one thing, but it really ramped up after your prophecy, Troy. Which it didn't. This is all the same story. And he's already admitted that they knew full well when he gave the fake word that it was already happening. So how is it prophetic to basically say, it's going to keep happening?
Signs.
Oh, and don't lose sight of the fact that what he did was, because the word said something about, I think on a local level first, he scoured to find a local source and used that to pretend that happened first, and then it picked up in the mainstream news. Except that's not true. It was all over the mainstream news for the 6 months prior to the prophecy.
We don't know how many they're going to remove or what that's going to look like. They finally removed a few signs in September, but now December comes and we have new information. And that information is that they're removing lots of signs, they're editing lots of signs, and it's happening all over the place. It's happening all over the nation. So this news starts coming out. And then late December and January, this explodes into a national story Tons of articles talking about it. Lots of social media outrage. Here's an article here: erasure of history and science spreads across national parks across the country. Here's another one: national park signs related to Native Americans, climate change to be removed. Climate change was the big one. Stuff they were moving stuff about climate change. So shameful. Backlash as U.S. national monuments conform to Trump's rewrite of history. So all these
These are just articles that he found. This story has been going on for 6 months prior. This is nonsense.
Out in January, I believe. It's a narrative of outrage, essentially saying Trump's censoring all references to climate change, historical racism, LGBT stuff. Again, started happening a little bit before you started sharing the word, but the biggest burst of it occurring and actually happening all over the nation and getting in the news on a major deal was December and then also January.
I think that article was from December 17th. So, and the word said by this Christmas. So that's pretty close to Christmas time.
Yes. Yeah. December 17th was that Arkansas article. Oh, this one's honestly, this one's just kind of funny. This one's funny to me. Whatever. Politics are silly sometimes. But this was a visual change that happened. So this was announced on November 25th. So after you shared the word, right before Christmas, November 25th. And then the lawsuit about this actually came out on December 10th, so even closer to Christmas. But what was announced was that the Trump administration was making new fee changes and stuff to all of the parks, including a visual change to the annual pass. So there's an annual pass that's you could buy, to have entry to all of the parks. And they made a new one. They made a non-resident. In the past, there was just one pass that anybody could get, but now they had a resident pass and a non-resident. If you don't live in the United States, you have to buy the more expensive non-resident pass. Okay, so that's the setup. And on December 10th, this group here, the Center for Biology and Diversity, they decide to sue basically the Trump administration because this is what the new resident pass is going to look like. It has President Trump's face on it and George Washington's face on it. And this upset them because the pass is supposed to have a picture of a national park based off of an annual photo contest. And this is actually set up by law. By law, it's set up, this annual photo contest, and how the passes work, and says that every year you have the contest and the best picture gets to be on the pass for the next year. So here's previous passes down here. Obviously, you can see we're all nature photos.
And mind you, this has literally nothing to do with the prophecy. To him, it's amusing because Trump put his picture on the pass. Whatever.
Photos. I don't know how this lawsuit's going to go. It's a little bit of a weird gray area because technically they did put this photo on the non-resident pass, the new non-resident pass. So it is on a pass, but then there's the resident pass, which has a picture of President Trump and George Washington. So this is a visual change that occurs with the national parks, and there's a lawsuit that came out on December 10th, right before Christmas. So that was a little funny. I don't think it's as big of a deal as the signs. The signs was
changing the signs of the parks. Yeah.
National story. So the first 2 points, you have Christmas, timeline, national park, national monument is changed.
Yeah, the Christmas timeline is not met because, as you had already admitted, this started happening before the prophecy was even given. It's not prophetic to say something's going to keep happening that's already happening.
Gene will look very different this Christmas. So you have the visual change occurring there. Timeline around Christmas obviously fulfilled. So the rest of this I feel like is pretty self-explanatory. Visual change.
All right, well let's see. I saw a vision of a reindeer. That's just so he's saying that's why he's saying Christmas. I saw a forest and a national park. I got this impression it was either a national park or something important like that. No discussion other than in general about national parks. No forest. A landmark. What landmark? A national wildlife situation. What national wildlife situation? A national monument is changing. Then it will look very different by this Christmas. What will look different by Christmas? Because they took signage off? And if that's what you're hanging your hat on, that was already happening before you gave this word. This has to do with both nature and the creation of man. What happened to the creation of man? Where's that in this prophecy? Nature being God's creation, the creation of man meaning something that people set up, right? Even if the location is just marked by what man has made, which is completely vague.
change the nature, the marking.
Yeah, what's marked by man, what man has made very similar to the signage on a national park.
You did have this, like lightning, suddenly national news will pick it up.
Suddenly, national news will pick it up. It's been in the national news since February. But you see, the prophecy said by Christmas something's coming that will have the local media concerned. So that's why he went and found the Ozark News to pretend that the prophecy was fulfilled. But he ignores, or he actually didn't ignore, he admitted that for months before the prophecy, they were talking about this, national news was. This was definitely in the national news when that executive order came out.
The local media will be concerned first. So that seemed to be fulfilled actually in December because, again, that local Arkansas.
Right, because I found one website on a local place that was talking about it and ignored all the ones in the mainstream media. This was fulfilled.
One was the first one that I could find. It's a little bit harder searching for like specifically local outlet news than it is for the national news. But that one local Arkansas outlet did pick up a lot of details of the story in December before I saw any national outlets did. So that was from my research. The last one here, I don't know exactly what the fulfillment of this is, or if it was just perhaps inaccurate.
He skipped the second bullet. They will say we should have seen this one coming, but we didn't. The exact opposite is true, right? Because everybody's been talking, everybody knew this was coming. That's why they complained when the executive order was signed. Everybody knew it was coming. Nobody was surprised by it. And then he's got a real problem with the last one. They'll attempt to put blame on someone who has no control over the situation or outcome. There's no such blame. He does what he always does. Well, these 2 things were fulfilled. These 10 things weren't, and we'll say this one, we don't know yet. Because that's how God operates, right? In the Old Testament prophets. Right? We all remember Elijah comes out and says, well, this is going to be fulfilled, but this one, I'm not really sure what this means.
You say they will attempt to put the blame on someone who has no control over the situation or the outcome. I thought maybe that would mean that people were going to try to blame the park rangers for changing the signs. I couldn't find any example of anybody blaming the employees of the park rangers for following orders and changing the signs. The closest thing I could find, we did have this, a big collection of groups, the beginning of February, actually, February 17th, are now suing the Trump administration over the sign changes. They're suing higher up. They're suing the Department of Interior, but they're also suing the NPS. And that kind of just stuck out to me, the National Park Service, who are just doing what the Department of Interior told them to do, who are doing what Trump told them to do.
Reese, let me explain something to you. That's how a lawsuit works. Okay? The National Park Service are the ones who implement the policy that came from the president. So you can't sue the president and leave out the people who are actually doing what was ordered. So it's not a statement that the NPS is somehow evil. It's if you're going to sue over this, you have to include all the parties involved.
So that stuck out to me as like the NPS is just following orders, literally, and yet they're getting sued for the sign changes right now. So that might be the connection for they're blaming somebody that is not actually in charge. But I don't know.
They are in charge. They're in charge of the national parks. Just because the policy came from the president doesn't mean that they have no culpability. They're the ones who implement it.
That's a little bit of a loose one there. So
a little bit of a loose one there. The casualness with these guys in terms of prophecy, speaking on behalf of the creator of the entire universe, is staggering. Like God would sit there and give them a prophecy, but the last one's loose.
No, I think that's a great response, Reese, and
of course
a great follow-up to that word.
Okay, final Christmas word. This one had a really, honestly exciting fulfillment that I didn't hear about for months. And I had no idea, and it took a lot of research before we finally found that this occurred because I didn't see it.
And by the way, I want you to pay attention to the thumbnail. Okay, now, whenever thumbnails don't match up to the prophecy that they claim, Troy goes and says, well, I just picked the pictures at random. There's nothing prophetic about the thumbnail. But when the thumbnail helps him, whoa, then it's prophetic. right? The barge prophecy, which is my favorite to reference for Troy Black, prophesied that there would be a ship that would run into a harbor or a bridge, and the top would be bent down. And the thumbnail he used the picture from the previous year when the ship ran into the bridge in Baltimore Harbor. So 4 hours after this prophecy was released, a ship had an explosion in Baltimore Harbor. Now, none of the other prophecy parts came true. There was 20 different ones, including the thing being bent down. It didn't run into a bridge. Like, none of the prophecy came true. But because because there was an explosion on a shipping vessel in Baltimore Harbor, and he used the picture of Baltimore Harbor in the thumbnail, he claimed victory. So this thumbnail, what is that? That's a picture. See the arrow? That's an explosion. So now take it away, Reese.
News. It's a pretty crazy fulfillment. So this is
Yes, it is, because it's nuts.
a Christmas explosion. Essentially, you said, God told me what's coming this Christmas, and you published this one on November 17th, 2025, so just a month before Christmas.
Yeah, so what I originally shared on November 17th was the phrase, this Christmas, a dynamite explosion.
A dynamite explosion. A TNT burst. Thumbnail of the explosion happening. Brute force. Effort exerted without caution.
TNT burst. A brute force effort.
And mind you, Reese already gave the game up because he said he couldn't find anything. Right? He couldn't find anything to match this. So wait till you see what they chose.
Exerted without caution, careless, and endangering the lives of the workers. And then I heard the phrase, what once was shall be no more. They will strip it of its
So what once was shall be no more. Clearly a reference to the explosion.
Natural origin and make it a show of force, a nasty habit instead. And then a building project left over from the quote unquote the old days that sets in motion a swarm of words against them. And then I got the impression that this was like an attack or a verbal attack against what's going on. And then I heard the phrase, a movement not strategized well and taken over by force. Watch and see what happens. This is right here within the nation you're a part of. Mentioned that I live in the United States. And then I heard Washington will have something to say about it. The interpretation there I mentioned was probably Washington, D.C., meaning like the White House or the government having something to say about it. And I got the impression about this word of knowledge that it put a very clear timeline on it this Christmas, which means either on or around Christmas, typically, and so I made that clear that it doesn't necessarily mean on Christmas Day, but at least close to Christmas. And then I also heard, in addition to this word on the day that I shared it, which was November 17th, and I shared that as well, the phrase, an explosion in the marketplace. This is a marketplace word. I shared that I didn't know if the Lord was specifically talking about an industry or a marketplace, meaning finance, or more of like a literal marketplace where you sell goods. So,
yeah, well, this had a really interesting outcome. You shared this on November 17th. And so about a month later, this was announced, and this was also tweeted out by Attorney General Pam Bondi. 4 defendants arrested for alleged anti-capitalist, anti-government plot to bomb U.S. companies on New Year's Eve. And so what happened was the FBI and local law enforcement stopped a bombing plan. So some people might not be happy about this because there wasn't a bomb that went off.
Yeah. Those people would be people who take prophecy literally. So when you say an explosion and you put a picture of an explosion on your thumbnail, there needs to be an explosion in your fulfillment, not a plot to bomb U.S. companies that was thwarted. The prophecy was not fulfilled, Reese.
It was planned to go off on New Year's Eve,
but
and
it
they were
didn't.
Caught right before Christmas, but there wasn't actually one that exploded. So we'll go back and look at the word, though, because I do think there might have been a little bit of a hint that this...
A little bit of a hint, right? Because that's how God operates with his prophets. He with a wink and a nod to like Jeremiah, he's like, hey, I want you to tell the people this, but, there's like a secret message encoded in there for you to have to figure out, all right?
Wasn't going to happen. But just to let you know what occurred, they arrested 4 members of a far-left Antifa-type group called the Turtle Island Liberation Front. I love their name. It's very cute. The Turtle Island Liberation Front. I'm going to talk about the name here in a little bit because that also connects to the prophecy. So they basically had a detailed plan written out that they were communicating between each other to blow up multiple businesses on New Year's Eve in the LA area, Orange County, LA area. They were caught constructing these bombs in the Mojave Desert outside of
Take a good look at the materials too. Do you notice what's not missing? I'm sorry, what's not there? Dynamite. Prophecy said dynamite. It said a TNT explosion. These look like handmade, homemade, chemically based bombs.
LA. This is crazy. So here's the tables of them, and I've got an aerial view here of the FBI picking them up. So they're making these bombs out in the desert, and you see all their homemade bomb making material. They're going to put them in backpacks, and they had like 4 or 5 companies that they were going to try to blow up, and also they were actively trying to recruit more people to help them make even more bombs so they could expand their plan and blow up even more than like 5 or 6. They were trying to expand it with more help to hopefully make it bigger. So let's go back to the prophecy really fast. Yeah. First bullet here, the Christmas timeline.
So before he goes through his lies, let's just go through this together. This Christmas, a dynamite explosion. No dynamite explosion. A TNT burst. No TNT burst. In fact, there was no TNT or dynamite in this alleged fulfillment. A brute force effort exerted without caution. Never happened, right? They got arrested. Careless and endangering the lives of the workers. Never happened. They got arrested. What was once shall be no more. And clearly that's meaning that whatever is blown up is not going to be there anymore, right? Never happened. They will strip it of its natural origin and make a show of force and nasty habit instead. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. And he does this. He just puts out these vague generalities that Reese can match up to anything. A building project left over from the old days that sets in motion a swarm of words against them. What building project, Reese? That never happened. I'm getting the impression that this is like an attack or a verbal attack. No. A movement not strategized well and taken over by force. Watch and see what happens. Okay, so they're going to claim that this was not well organized and the FBI busted them pretty easily. I'll give them that. It doesn't matter because none of the other stuff came true. This is right within this nation that you're a part of. Fine. Washington will have something to say about it. Well, the FBI was involved, so that's fine, but the premise is already eviscerated. There was no explosion.
Obviously accurate. This Christmas, they're caught right before Christmas. The bombs were planned to go off New Year's Eve, right after Christmas. A dynamite explosion, TNT burst, all that kind of stuff connects there.
But it doesn't connect there. I hate when he does this because he just assumes the marks are too stupid to catch it. There was no explosion. Oh, you see the connection there? No.
Without caution, careless and endangering the lives of the workers. So they're blowing up businesses. That's their plan. So they could have hurt employees. Workers are those who are employed.
Yeah, the first half of that sentence is a brute force effort exerted. But that never happened. They were caught
by all these businesses that they were planning on blowing up, right? So we got a little bit more cryptic language here, but I think there's a connection. So
by cryptic, he means ridiculously vague, and it can mean anything.
What once was shall be no more. They will strip it of its natural origin, make it a show of force.
Yeah, let's be clear. The first part of that really belongs in the first bullet, because that's referring to the explosion. What was once shall be no more. The second part of it makes no sense. It's like that old Chris Roseborough line, right? Blue sleeps faster than Tuesday. Yeah, it's got all the necessary parts to make the sentence grammatically correct. It just doesn't make any sense.
A nasty habit instead. This is my interpretation, and feel free to disagree. If it's just
I disagree.
It's just too vague or too cryptic to know.
Way too vague.
Oh, I don't know.
It's very vague language. Yes,
it's very vague. It's very vague language. Sure,
and the casualness of God's just speaking to me vaguely again.
I thought this was really interesting. So the name, the Turtle Island Liberation Front, this actually comes from American Indian creation stories. The idea is that the North American continent was on the back of a giant turtle. When they say Turtle Island, they're referring to the United States. Wow. Or North America, Canada, Mexico included. They're saying that they're so anti-government, anti-capitalist that they're trying to wipe away. We don't want to be the United States anymore. We're going to go back to how it was before. And there was only American Indians here, right? No European colonists. But what's interesting, of course, is their group really doesn't have anything to do with Native Americans. They are just a violent Marxist group.
Let's see if that's true. How did Turtle Island and Liberation Front come up with their name? So he's right. Talked about the Native American thing, but then he's like, but they have nothing to do with Native Americans. In a video posted on their social media, a person linked to the group described Turtle Island as the decolonized name for the Americas and indicated the group seeks reparations and land back to these indigenous groups. That's only like their entire core belief that he just blew off as if it doesn't exist.
And they're using the name just to be anti-capitalist.
That's not why they're using the name. They literally, one of their leaders is on a video clearly stating in social media that they want reparations and land back for the indigenous groups.
Using the name Turtle Island. And so your line here, you say stripped it of its natural origin, made it a show of force, a nasty habit instead. That describes the group and their use of the name, that they're stripping the name of its natural origin, which was a creation story for certain tribes, and now they're applying it to be like, this is now a violent Marxist name.
Yeah, except you're making that part up. You're making up the part where they've decided to strip away the original meaning of Turtle Island. That's not true.
Essentially, that we're going to use and make it a nasty habit, and we're going to put this name on ourselves, and then we're going to try to blow up some buildings. So that was my connection to it. There could be disagreement. It's vague language, obviously, but I thought the connection was kind of interesting. The name really just stuck out to me because they stripped it from its original origin. A building project left over, quote, from the old days that sets in motion a swarm of words against them. Well, obviously they had a swarm of words against them in the form of, reading them their rights, getting blasted on social media.
Wow. Really? A swarm of words against them in a prophecy you think means because they got arrested? Because somebody online said something about it?
Media, all that kind of stuff. But this building project in the old days is a pretty interesting little detail here. I actually wasn't too familiar with this, but in the comments of these news articles, people were like, wow, this is just like the 60s and the 70s. People were saying that in the news article. So I had to look this up. There were far left groups in the 60s and the 70s that bombed multiple buildings. And this Turtle Island group is literally just copying the same playbook that they did in the 60s and the 70s of, trying to do these anti-capitalist bombings of blowing up buildings. It's this kind of an interesting pun here. You say a building project, which makes you think
so you think that the creator of the entire universe gave a prophetic word to his prophet Troy Black to tell the church, but he was speaking secretly in a pun? No. What obviously is that this was stated by Troy Black in the fake prophecy that there would be a literal building project that was left over from the old days. Not that blowing up a building is suddenly a building project.
You're building something, but the project was actually blowing up buildings. Their project for buildings was blowing them up, left over from the old days.
No, nobody says it that way. Come on, Reese. This is what happens when you have to get desperate to try to pretend that things are fulfilled that are not. The plan to blow up like 5 businesses in LA by a radical left-wing group is not a building project. God wouldn't say it that way.
Directly connected to the same kind of far left groups doing this in the 60s and 70s. Again, could have a different interpretation, but that seemed to line up the best for me.
Sure. I mean, that sounds like a decent connection to me.
We have the movement not strategized well, taken over by force. Watch and see what happens. To me, this could have been a hint that this wasn't going to work because this group was obviously not strategized the best. Honestly, it looks like the FBI very easily found out about their plan and took them out. Don't think it was that difficult for the FBI. Their plan wasn't well strategized. They were easily caught, taken over by force, so wasn't able to go through. Washington will have something to say about it. Self-evident. We had the FBI involved, and then of course a direct call out from the Attorney General, who's tweeting from Washington D.C. literally. Okay, last point here. This wraps this all together. Explosion in the marketplace word. I don't know how else you could possibly interpret this. This is a anti-capitalist group. Their goal was literally to blow up companies. They're trying to blow up businesses as part of their larger goal to destroy free market capitalism. Mm-hmm. So it's literally a market-driven action that they're doing. Of course,
except there was no action. The prophetic word you just read reads, an explosion in the marketplace. There was no explosion in the marketplace, Reese.
Anti-markets or anti-capitalism. They're trying to destroy free market capitalism. So it's an explosion in the marketplace. That's what it would have been if it was allowed to have gone off, because the LA area, of course, is like one of the country's biggest marketplaces. So many businesses in that area. The only last connection here, this one didn't have anything to do with the United States and Washington. So this might have just been a coincidence, but I thought this was interesting. There was an actual literal marketplace that caught fire and caused multiple explosions in the building, was blowing up, on fire. A bunch of Christmas shoppers had to evacuate. This happened early December. This was, of course, was in Russia, but there was a little bit of an interesting connection to it, possibly because it was literally left over from the Soviet Union days. This was an old marketplace left over from the old days. And then there's like the communist connection there, with which that wasn't in your word, but with the same as the group, the Turtle Island group is the same kind of like, this was left over from the old school communism, like the 60s and 70s Soviet Union kind of time period. They also endangered their workers because there was no safety requirements being met, and that's why the fire was able to spread, and that's why it started in the first place. It was like an electrical sort of thing. And then they had a swarm of attack of words against them via a criminal investigation into the owners of the market because they weren't up to code.
That's not a swarm of words against them.
Right. So could just be a coincidence, but I wanted to throw one in there because that happened in December. And it had some connections to the word, but of course the greater fulfillment was the one that actually happened in the United States, and that Washington, D.C. responded to, because that was a core part of what your word actually was.
So the second page of this prophecy, I got an impression about this word of knowledge, put a very clear timeline. That's saying it's Christmas. That's fine. And then an explosion in the marketplace, a marketplace word. Once again, there is no explosion.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth mentioning. It could just be a coincidence, but I think it's worth it to put it in there. Well, Reese, thank you so much for all the hard work you did on researching these and putting the responses together. I appreciate it. I know those watching probably deeply appreciate it as well, being able to see the follow-ups. And again, I apologize for getting those Christmas words follow-up.
And that's the word. So this is the Troy Black grift, right? He, abuses verses about prophecy in the Bible to pretend that, because we prophesy in part, we know in part, we prophesy in part. He doesn't understand what that verse means. It does not mean that you yourself, when you get a word from God, there's pieces missing. That's not what it means. It means we don't see all of time like God sees all of time. So, like the Agabus prophecy from Acts was completely fulfilled, right? I've seen false prophets argue that Agabus got something wrong. He got nothing wrong. He just didn't know what would happen after Paul got arrested. God didn't need to give him that part because that had nothing to do with the prophecy he was charged with. So I kind of promised that whenever they do these, I would try to my best to debunk them, because he's got 125 fulfilled prophecies in his fake prophecy archive. None of them are fulfilled. None of them. Go watch today's video. This is probably going to come out tomorrow. Go watch today's video, which he claims is the most precise fulfillment of prophecy in his lifetime. Not from him, from everybody. And it is so horrifically stupid and bad. The facts that he gets some core facts embarrassingly wrong. That makes it obvious, by the way, that he does not hear from God. And to put the Solana one in here is just, the ultimate display of hubris. Is to talk again about how you lost your sheep money, that the sheep are probably trying to sue you about it, and you claim it's a fulfilled prophecy because it went under 100. Who cares if your sheep lost 22 points of value on the stock you told them to buy? George W. Bush prophecy, entirely based on a fabricated story. The entire thing falls apart. The last one we just looked at, without the explosion, there is no prophecy. The whole thing is false. It's fake. The national parks, oh, I'm going to prophesy in October about something that was already reported in September that was actually put out in executive order in March and has been discussed since February. But I'm a prophet. And the rest of it. So let me know what you think. Leave your comments in the comment section. I try to get back to everybody. Give it a thumbs up. Share the video. Please subscribe. We are bobsledding toward 1,500. Thank you so much. Troy and his little brother Reese, Black. Mark and Avoid. Hopefully this will be the last Troy Black video of the week. I know Troy was missing me, so I'm sure he's happy now that he's caught my eye again. So test everything and hold fast.